So, perfect. It's time for our second big panel on that stage, now focusing on the political frameworks. I mean, if I do an investment or not, that depends on many things, most of the time on the return of investment. So especially in private investments, you often go for low-risk technologies, low-risk countries. So the big question is now, what can political frameworks do? Can they help to make other sectors more interesting? That's what we would like to find out now in the next good 60 to 70 minutes. But before we start, of course, let me introduce to you our panelists first. We start on my left-hand side. Katharina Schulze, Chairwoman of the Parliamentary Group Alliance 90, the Greens, from the Bavarian State Parliament. Short travel for you. Then, yes. We have Tabby with us, Tabby Melamu, CEO of SAPVIA, all the way from South Africa. Pleasure to have you here, Tabby. We have Walburga Hemetsberger, she's CEO of SolarPower Europe. Also a pleasure to have Eman, Adel, sustainability, energy and capacity building expert at the Regional Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency from Egypt. Pleasure to have you. And all the way from the United Kingdom, Aniela Foster-Turner, Legal Director at Gore Street Capital. So, Katharina, as you're sitting next to me, I would like to start with you directly. In the first panel, we talked about the current trends in the energy investment. So, as a chairwoman of the Greens in the Bavarian State Parliament, what is the current state, first of all, of investment in renewable energy and the energy transition in general in Bavaria? And would you say it's enough?
First of all, thank you for the invitation, and I have to say a clear no, it's not enough, because especially Bavaria is kind of the state in Germany where you see what is happening when the official government is not so into renewables. We have a lack of wind power in Bavaria. We had several years ago a hard fight about if power lines are necessary from the north to the south. And we had a government and the party of the government who was fighting against, in Germany, there was this really bad word, Monstertrasse, that means monster power line, where they really made a big fuss about, so that, for example, this power line is still not in use. We are lacking behind in so many places, so I would definitely say you need a government, you need a political framework, you need a legal framework who lets the renewable energy blossom. If the government and if the politics try to stop it, it's harder to grow. And in Bavaria, as a Green Party member, my colleagues and we really fight hard to push the government to be a little bit faster. So it really helps that on the federal level, the Greens are now in the government. So the Prime Minister of Bavaria has to move, even he doesn't want to move.
So that's your position, that's your role of the Bavarian State Parliament, to push hard.
Yeah, we are the second strongest party, so we're the opposition leader, and we see our role in controlling the government and, of course, giving ideas and examples how you could do it better. Because I think it's very important that the opposition is not only there and criticizing everything and saying this is bad and that is bad, but also bringing own legal framework in the Bavarian State Parliament to have the discussion about that. And I think some people are here from Bavaria, you always know our discussions are kind of hard in this parliament, and unfortunately our ideas are always neglected, so but we keep on fighting.
Do so, perfect. Tabby, you are the CEO of the South African PV Association. That means you know everything about the solar project development in Africa. You're true experts, so please tell us a bit more about the state of investment in it, and tell us what is the current situation there.
Yeah, I think I know quite a lot about South Africa, not so much about the continent. I heard our colleague from Nigeria giving us an overview of the opportunities there. But thank you very much for inviting me. It's an incredible honor for me to be part of this exciting panel. A special thank you to one of my colleagues, Ms. Anchia, who recommended me for this panel. But just to answer your question, South Africa is both exciting, finds itself in an exciting and a very challenging space. I'll start with the challenging aspect first, bad news first, before you go into good news. It's challenging because the citizens of the country, as well as businesses, are subjected to prolonged periods of power cuts. If you are aware of the landscape in South Africa, you'd know that on a good day, the citizens do not have power for 2 hours. On a bad day, or on a normal day, it's about 10 hours in a period of 24 hours. So we are in a period of crisis. And I think it's not just South Africa, it's probably the case in most African countries. But there are good news, right? We don't waste good crises. What has happened in the past couple of years is that we have seen the uptake of renewable energy technologies. Wind, solar, but solar specifically because we consider ourselves as a democratic technology because you can apply it at small scale, so households can tap into solar. But it can also ensure that businesses keep operating even at stage 6. We call it stages in South Africa. Stage 6 means you don't have power for 10 hours a day, by the way. And so that is really exciting. We've seen the uptake of solar at residential, at commercial and industry, but also at utility scale. And government has done a good job. They have their faults, but they have liberalized the market. They've opened it up to the private sector. So private projects can, a private developer can develop a project without needing a license. And because of that intervention, we've seen a huge uptake in the private sector market. But there's still a long way to go. We have currently about 2.4 gigawatts of installed capacity, solar capacity in South Africa. If you convert that into investment, you're looking at about 3.5 billion, I think, billion euros of investment in the solar PV, and that is growing in leaps and bounds. We just did a survey with our developers as well as independent power producers, and over the next 5 years, they are committed, that's what they told us, to developing 66 gigawatts of solar storage and PV. So it's really an exciting time for South Africa, but also for the continent, because we have the resources, we have the land, and we need power, we need electricity. 600 million people. I know my sister from Nigeria indicated that 600 million people on the continent do not have access to basic modern power. And we can't sleep. We cannot afford to do nothing about it. Absolutely. When people need that, yeah.
Do you have the feeling that policy is doing enough?
It's trying in the South African context, but I think the issue is that policy sends very mixed messages. So on the one day, you'll have whoever is in power will excite the population about, promoting renewable energy or making sure that the majority of the population gets access to power. On another day, you get people that are just prioritizing different things. So I think policy certainty is definitely key, and a commitment to put some of these interventions for a long haul. Sometimes we want quick fixes. Quick fixes do not work. Mm-hmm. If we want meaningful solutions, we need to be in it for a long haul. And so, yes, policy is slowly moving in the right direction. In the South African context, definitely, and in some other African continents, I know Namibians are here, but by and large, it's the stop-go nature of implementation of the policy that exists that is just holding the continent back.
Absolutely. By the way, I love the attitude of we never waste a good crisis. I really love that. We stay with the topic of solar power. Well, I would like to come to you. Within Solar Power Europe, you represent the entire European solar industry. Before you worked in the European Parliament and the EU Commission. So in these two capacities, how would you describe the overall situation of policy incentives to investment in renewable energies?
Thanks very much for having me here. Actually, I wanted to pick what you said, that you should never waste a good crisis, because that's the kind of state we're also in Europe at the moment. It's a very different crisis, obviously, but with the war in Ukraine, and we very much stand to the Ukraine, we have been facing our vulnerabilities, and already, before the war, the European politics have seen that it is important to invest in renewables, but this has been accelerated. We had REPower EU, which is a plan that is accelerating the take-up of renewables, and earlier on we already had the Green Deal. So what I want to say is, it is really about political willingness, and it is about plans that you need to have and stick to those plans. So if you don't have visibility, if you don't have regulatory stability, you will not get there, and you will not get the investments that you need in order to speed up. Because one other crisis we all have is the climate crisis, that some tend to forget among all other crises, but this is something that we are all sharing, even if some are still not believing that there is a crisis. But I do think women in particular are seeing these kind of crises more, I would tend to say. And that is also why we have more women in solar, and I'm particularly proud of it, than in any other industry in the energy sector. So IRENA came up with a study showing that 40%, still not there where we should be, at 50%, but we have 40% of women in our sector already. And the nice thing about it is that, we're always talking about that women need to have a seat on the table. But renewables, and solar in particular, is building a new table altogether. And this is, I think, the beauty of it. So a woman pushing for renewables, pushing for not just tackling the climate crisis, but also tackling all the other crises, and coming back to the crisis, so energy price crisis that we have in Europe, making it difficult for businesses to be competitive, making it difficult for households to pay their energy bills. If we would have invested in renewables earlier on, we wouldn't see those crisis moments. This is why we need to speed up in order to bring back social equality, basically, and to make sure that we're succeeding in this transition. And maybe a couple of figures before I'm stopping where we are today in Europe. So we installed some 40 gigawatt of solar last year. I always like to compare it for those who are not so much into energy. I know that you're all into energy, but I think it's impressive if you compare it. It's kind of 40 nuclear power plants that we installed last year in Europe, and it's not the end of the story yet. We're expecting some 60 gigawatt this year. This is, by the way, also what the IEA tells us is necessary in order to close the gas gap that we will very likely be facing next winter. And we're heading to the 1 gigawatt by 2030 that we will have installed, and 100 gigawatt installed yearly. So, we are scaling up, but it's still too slow, and we need to push forward. And coming back to your question, we need regulatory stability, we need ambition from member states to really see what's happening as well, because the solar goals in European member states are still very low. They're reviewing them at the moment, and we do hope they're getting more realistic. So the right ambition, and we need to have politicians, and I'm very happy that the Greens are very much supportive, pushing in the right direction in order to get rid of all those crises that we have.
Walburga, thank you very much. So, Eman, you have built over the years extensive experience and knowledge in sustainable energy projects and green finance in the whole MENA region. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about the situation there and what policy support is existing there when it comes to investments. Give us an overview on the market.
So first of all, thank you for having me here and for making such an impressive event happen. Actually, I'm really impressed. And yes, well, so I can say that lots have been done, yet we are still way behind. We didn't reach what we are targeting yet. And the global annual investment, as you know, needs to be quadrupled to reach the 1.5 goal. For that, I believe that the financing pools needed to be managed in more let's say, effective way to consider all the financial investment support in particular. So starting from having the access to finance that should be considered for both supply and demand side, and for having also policies to promote the investment, considering the direct and indirect investment. The decision maker and policy framework also have to manage the way between the fiscal incentives, of course, considering the reimbursement mechanism, feed-in tariff, net metering, and so on, considering the tax deduction and duty exemptions, considering also the land lease and creating a pool of trusted service provider to ensure the quality. I would say also the stakeholders should be working together, like considering the international financial agencies, IFIs, and even commercial banks to ensure the compilation of all the aspects together. For the MENA region status, I would say that there are lots in progress, but let's give some examples. So for Egypt, for example, there is around 9 climate finance credit lines with around $1 billion. Lots of development partners are participating in this, including, of course, the EU, the AFD, the EBRD, and even lots of public governmental institutions in Egypt. In the case in Tunisia is very impressive because they have created FTE, which is the Fond du Transition Énergétique, if I'm pronouncing it right, because it's in French. So it's somehow a revolving fund that is raised in particular from the public sector under the umbrella of the government, and they have like a renewing sustainable fund for that from the taxes on renewable energies and energy efficiency, which creates sustainability for all. They have started this FTE in 2014, and they are still working on it and even having more share for renewable and for energy efficiency. The case in Morocco is not far away because you have also 5 credit lines, climate credit lines in progress, and in 2015 they have started Morocco CEF, and after implementing or support to implement more than 230 renewable energy and energy efficiency projects, they have created the second phase, which is Morocco GEF in 2021, with around 260 billion euro, which is a huge amount. So I believe that we are doing good status, but we need to push forward. We need to go further, and we need to move on compiled form to achieve the goals. Yeah. So
kind of the same in all countries where we're good status, but we need to keep so much more forward, also in the MENA region. Thank you very much, Eman, for sharing these insights on this market with us.
Thank you.
Aniela, up to you. You're working with Gore Capital. That's a firm that is investing a lot in RE topics. So before you worked with Siemens and Siemens Gamesa, you always worked on big energy, renewable energy projects. So what would you say, what policy action is indeed needed to further accelerate investment in already developed markets, but also in new developing markets? What policy action do we need?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Susanne. I will actually start just by saluting this initiative, and also, the amazing audience here and my panel members. I think that, just the fact that we are having these conversations and creating the space for this conversation is already a massive step forward. I would say that transformation depends on each one of us, but transformation in the energy transition space depends on clean energy grids and efficiencies. And we have heard some of the sobering statistics Dr. Rethabile have mentioned earlier for Africa. I think that it's actually in a global environment, over 800 million people don't have access to electricity, and over 20 billion don't have access to clean cooking and heating means. So these are really, really sobering numbers when we are looking at that. Looking again at statistics, I think that Bloomberg report has established that back in 2020, just before the pandemic, it was quite a chunky, sizable investment when it comes to the renewable energy, over $300 billion. Sadly, it was only 2 billion of those that have been invested in the developing countries. So I think that the space for us all to change that and contribute towards the energy transition and that sustainable development is there. In terms of policies, the space for policies changing and means in which government can contribute to that, I think probably one of them is the incentives and the regulations. We have learned in the US, for example, of the Inflation Reduction Act and all of the tax credit and so on and so forth. They are, the UK is leading the space there with the green strategy, also with all of the initiatives in reference to the stewardship code and green taxonomy and so on and so forth. So I think that one of the policies that we have to look at, especially in the space of developing and emerging economies, it's looking at those incentives. And then, of course, crucial for the investment is the infrastructure. So we need to have all of the focus there. We need the infrastructure in place in order for that renewable investment to happen and take place. Without those networks, without the digital infrastructure, without all of those renewable energy projects, without the infrastructure being in place, that is very difficult to achieve. We talked in the earlier panels and speeches about alliances and cooperation. I think this is another very, very important element. We are looking ahead at some of the leading countries in terms of renewable investment in the renewable space. So I think that's really important there. And of course, the space of all of this international cooperation here in the room, having such a diverse, not just panel speakers, but also groups here in the room and such a diverse workspace, it's really critical to success. At Gore Street, I work with a very diverse team, and I really think that diversity brings business and contributes to business. So this is just so important. I know we will talk about this in a little bit as well in terms of gender diversity and diversity in general. Other means, of course, we are talking about investments, so we need access to finance. I think that Eman has mentioned that earlier. It's really important to create a space and build in new financing models, contributing to opening that space so that the policies are in there. And of course, it's also the rule of law and the political stability. So we need to create a framework that will allow and encourage investment and has as a primary focus the renewable energy space.
Absolutely, and I would love to deep dive a bit more on everything you have said now in the next panel round. And Walburga, I start with you. Let's have a quick check on what kind of policy support is really needed and how can policy incentivize investments in the industry. Maybe you can make it more practical for us. So the question to you is on a European level. What do you expect? What kind of policy action is really good, which is really useful? What do you expect to come?
So we need to go faster. That's what I was explaining earlier on. And in Europe, what we need at the moment is, we've visualized it with a very nice solar powerhouse that we would like to see. And there's 5 building blocks of that solar powerhouse. The first one is regulatory stability, and I think this is more a general topic. All over the world, we need regulatory stability in order to give confidence to investors to invest in renewables. So this is also true for Europe, so we need that regulatory stability. Then we have a specific issue in Europe that permitting is quite slow. And we need to speed up permitting big times. We're a little better when it comes to solar than our wind colleagues, which have even longer permitting times. But there are some countries in Europe where it's taking up to 4 years to get permits for a solar farm. So we need to speed up that. We need to make sure that we have the workers that are required. By 2030, we will need some 1.5 million people working in our sector, up from the 500,000 which are already working in our sector today. So massive people that we need to have in our sector to realize those goals. We also need to make sure, and that's a huge challenge, but nevertheless, I think it is doable with the right mindset. We need to have future-proof grids. You have been mentioning already the challenges in Bavaria of the transmission grid extension. It's not about extending the grid only. We need to have a lot of investments extending the grid, but it's about changing the mindset, how to better integrate renewables into the grid, how to better manage the grid, how to incentivize grid operators. So this is the fourth building block. And the last building block is that we need to have green and sustainable supply chains, because we can only keep the trust in our industries if we have green and sustainable supply chains, which are also diversified. At the moment, we're trying to also build up an industry again in Europe, pushing for some 30 gigawatt or more to be installed as in the production capacity here in Europe by 2030. This is very important to also show the general public that also on that side, value is added in Europe. And we can have a diversified supply chain all over the world, maybe in South Africa, maybe in Egypt, maybe anywhere else in the world, in order to source the products that we need for our energy transition and to make it really a global success. So this is our solar powerhouse in Europe. I don't know that the challenges are different in other parts of the world. We're also working in our global activities that we also have on other parts of the world, where we're producing reports and partnering with different countries on the specificities outside of Europe. But one thing is coming back everywhere again and again, which is regulatory stability, bankability of products, of projects. But this regulatory stability, I think this is the core everywhere globally.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much. I still have a look on the watch because I know you have to leave in about 3 minutes, unfortunately. So what I would like to do is just to give you a minute to address to the audience. So in best case, what would you say should everybody in this room take home from the conference?
In the best case, I really do think, that renewables are not just making it possible that we can tackle all those crises. And it's really a moment where all of the crises that we are seeing are coming together with one solution, which is pushing renewables big times. And the beauty of it is that it's not just about transforming our energy system, but it's also giving not just a seat at the table for women, but building a new seat altogether, like what I said in the beginning. So this is really the opportunity also to have more equality in our societies, and we should go for it.
Walburga, thank you very much.
And excuses that I have to go.
I know you are in a hurry today, so we appreciate very, very much that you took the time to bring your knowledge to that panel. Thanks a lot, Walburga. And now we bring the discussion on an international level with going to Eman. So Eman, what is your expectation towards the international community in regards to investment? What would you say that we need to step up international investments of public funds? And would there be, next to the financial effects, any additional benefits? What would you say?
So yes, of course, we need to step up. Yes, this is quite obvious. So as estimated investment of the limitation to the global warming have been considered as around 2.5 trillion USD annually. This estimation have been done before the COVID-19 and updated after that to be 4.5 trillion USD annually. This have been announced by the IBCC last April in 2022, and it shows that we need to give more investments to that. So I am expecting more. I'm expecting more on the temperature goal of the 1.5 degree. I'm expecting more in the financial goal to direct the global finance flows toward the low GHG emission and climate resilient investment. I'm expecting more in the adaptation goal to increase the ability to adapt to climate change and increase the resilience. And I'm expecting more in involving the public sector, because we have lots of success stories while addressing them in the investment. So we have Jarif in Jordan. This is a very successful methodology. We have FTA in Tunisia. This is a very successful mechanism also, and it's considered also the energy efficiency, not only renewable energy. Bin Ban solar project in Egypt, while including the public sector to manage it, it went very successful, and I think more than 20 companies have been contributed together to build the planet within 4 years. Starting from, of course, the environmental and social impact assessments that have been done as a first stage. And Noor 1 and Noor 2 in Morocco also have been considered as a very well-known success stories. So yes, we need to address more investment, and we need to consider more the public sector.
Absolutely. Katharina, coming back to you and talking about regional legislators, it's sad, but we still know investment in fossil fuels is still on the rise. So how can a regional legislator like the Bavarian State Parliament counteract this trend? And what are your expectations toward the federal government and parliament? What do you expect?
I mean, we just have to make ourselves clear we're in the middle of a big transformation, becoming climate neutral. And as Walburga was saying, we're building new businesses, we're building new ideas, and of course, some old companies don't like that so much, because it means change. And that's why there is still a lot of power and people trying to put stones in our way. So I would say, two things are mandatory. You were saying it really nicely in the beginning. It makes no sense if politics is saying today, oh yeah, we're into solar power, and tomorrow they're like, oh no, maybe not, maybe we like Kernfusion or something else more. So these regulatory frameworks are essential, and we have to have them on the European level, on the federal level, but also on the state level. Why? Because then businesses and everybody knows, okay, it makes sense to invest there. Then banks, funding knows, okay, maybe we should put our money out of the fossil area and put it in the renewable area. So for politicians, I always say, I cannot build a solar park, I cannot invent the newest technology, but that's not my job. My job as a politician is giving a framework where business, where entrepreneurs have a biotope, an area where they can put all their ideas in and build this new system. So that's our first job. And I would say on the state level, the government can be a role model. A role model by, for example, saying on all our public houses, like, I don't know, the hospital or the school or the university, we want solar panels on it. That's a really easy solution, because the state has a lot of public buildings, and that would be also a clear signal in the market, oh, we can invest. There are hundreds of schools, there are hundreds of other public buildings. We can put solar panels there, and this is the future. So I would... It's also something which we as a Green Party in the Bavarian State Parliament were saying over and over again, please make the rule that on every public building there has to be a solar panel, and make please a framework, a law, that if you're building a new house as a private person, then it would also make very much sense and should be the new norm that you also put a solar panel on it, because that would also be an signal into the market, into the in the sector, into the businesses, that this is the way where we want to go.
So talking about the regional level, talking about the state level, what do you expect from international corporations?
Yeah. As a green politicians, I know that it would be very stupid to think that we can do it as Bavaria alone. Some people think that, but I think that's wrong.
I mean, we are really smart and good looking,
but we need cooperation, and we here in Germany, we have to think European, definitely, and we have to work together with the rest of the world as well. Me personal, I wish, if I'm allowed to say what I wish, I would really wish that we would focus more on all the people all around the globe who are already working on these issues. Because I always have the feeling the people who don't want this new thing, the people who don't want solar panels or windmills or climate neutrality, they're very loud. They're very, very loud, and they're always kind of screaming, and many people are saying, oh, we have to listen to them. And who is listening to them who want to make it better? Who are listening to them who are already working on these issues? How great would it be if all the people, in the business sector, on the political sector, in the civil society, would work more together and giving each other more space and building this new future? Because I think you can show how great it's gonna be better if it's easier to okay, no, I have to start again, sorry. I think you can bring more people on your team if you can show how good it will be in the end. So maybe we should talk more about why we are doing that, because we're not doing it just because we don't have anything else to do. We're doing it because you pointed it out, and we have to do it because we want to have still a future on this planet. So we are doing that for us, for all of us. All the work you are putting in, we're not doing it. We are doing it because that our children and grandchildren still can live here, and I think that's a good thing. And that's why we should maybe even talk more about that, and kind of building an alliance of the people who want to move forward instead of always giving the others who want to stay where they are too much room.
Absolutely. Aniela, I wanted... Yeah, please go ahead. Aniela, I would like to go with you on a different level and perspective here, because a study by IRENA just recently showed that the vast majority of investment from 2013 to 2020, from the public investment part, went into low-risk technologies, low-risk areas. We know that, return of investment and so on. So what does that do to innovation? What does that do to development? And what can we do against that movement?
Yeah, I guess there is quite an impact there. And in terms of what can we do to change it, especially on the innovation and innovation side, would be perhaps one of the steps that we could do is just to look at investment in education and workforce development. I work in my spare time. I work with an association in the UK which is called Women Engineering Society. They have been there for 100 years just to support women pursuing engineering careers. And actually, next week there is an International Day for Women in Engineering, so they will be sponsoring that event. The reality is that, at least in the UK, studies have shown that there is a steady increase from 8% women in engineering in 2016 to 12% in 2019-2020. But it really is just a very small progression there. So I think that from that perspective, it's really important for private investment, but also government investment in education, just making the space there and encouraging all of us here in the room, but also throughout our jobs and throughout our communities and so on, encouraging young people just to pursue those educational careers, educational interests, and for the government to create a space for that to happen. So that is really important. Obviously, we are talking about investment a lot, so innovative financing models, it's another way of balancing off and bringing that innovative to the forefront of the agenda. So I think that, we have to look at how do we create a very stable regulatory environment, remove entries, barriers to entry, how do we create a space for all of that innovative solutions to come to the table, and for those we heard in one of the panels earlier, the angel investors, and all of that space to be created for more investment to be brought into that innovative and research. When I was working for Siemens and Siemens Gamesa, I spent actually close to 2 decades with them, and it's an engineering company, so I work very closely with engineers, although I'm of legal background myself. They've always looked at finding ways of supporting, supporting innovation and development and research and so on. So from that perspective, they had so many schemes in place for graduates, for apprentices, and so on and so forth. And I know that there is quite a bit of attention from governments as well on that side. So I think that is really important for that to continue and to be encouraged. Another step would be perhaps just to streamline regulation. Sometimes, we create such a heavy space from a legal perspective. We talked about permits, we talked about grid and infrastructures, and so on and so forth. We make it so difficult for that to happen and for positive impact to take place at a faster pace, because in the end, we can't continue in the same manner that we have done. We have to make the transition happen a lot quicker than our predecessors, and so on and so forth. So yeah, those are just a few ideas. What else can I mention? So perhaps I'm mentioning infrastructure and so on and so forth, but maybe just from the regulatory perspective, again, just currency risks, bringing new ways of making investment happen, and making it in a way that will just speed up the transition.
Just a few ideas you bring to the table here. Tabby, we are, in Germany we would say, wir sind hier nicht bei Wünsch dir was. I think the TV show is called pretty much the same in the US, so Make a Wish or something. You mentioned a lot of things already when answering my first question, but what would you wish from the South African government? What can they do to really incentivize investment in your region?
Yeah, I think some of the things that South African government can do have already been mentioned. Regulatory stability, making sure that they build policies to create skills. The projected growth for the sector is massive. And as a continent, or South Africa specifically, the unemployment, especially for young people, is sitting at 40%. And we would have missed an opportunity if we don't use this sector to create the much needed jobs. So my wish would be for us to be mindful enough to create policies that enable job skills development and make sure that the young people get access to opportunities. We would have missed out on an opportunity if we do not promote localization along the value chain. And that's why we work with SolarPower Europe to explore how we can integrate our supply chain, and so that it's not just concentrated on one region in the world. Thirdly, I think South Africa as a continent is vast, is massive. But each of the regions or countries have their own competitive and comparative advantages. And my wish for our continent is that we integrate our electricity networks a bit more. Congo is rich in water and a whole lot of other things that have already been mentioned. How do we get that hydroelectricity from Congo to the south of the continent? How do we get solar from the Northern Cape side of the continent to perhaps the east side, which is not as rich as they are? So that regional integration of electricity networks is already there, but making sure that it's bolstered. Lastly, we are a very vast continent. And usually when we develop policies around electrification, we're thinking about centralized solutions, big power stations everywhere. But we are at a time in our history when we should embrace decentralized solutions, microgrids, mini-grids, because it will take us maybe half a century to take electricity to the most remote areas of our continent if we're going to try and build huge power lines. So decentralization, and ultimately I think and I wish our continent can be mindful of the needs of the majority of the populations. Access to decent sources of energy, modern electricity, creation of jobs using this as a tool. Renewable energy is not going to solve all our challenges as a continent, but it can certainly address some of them. So really, I have lots of wishes for my continent. So let me stop here.
We still have time, so go ahead.
Yeah. So also, I think, definitely, I think I can't emphasize the skills enough, right? And the skills in the manufacturing of some of these doesn't even have to be panels, because sometimes we get so fixated, and that's the case in most of African countries where we want to manufacture modules. But other components, balance of plant, cables, there are already capabilities and capacity in South Africa, at least, that can be enhanced and developed so that you create jobs and you make sure that you build, you attract the much needed investment. The last issue is that because of our resources, which I've already spoken about, we are in a position to be the leader in new frontier industries. Hydrogen economy, green hydrogen as an example. I don't think very few continent has the amount of land that we have that is still not occupied to generate renewable energy that would fit into hydrogen generation. That's why Namibia is ahead of the curve. That's why South Africa is also exploring that, and other countries in the continent. But if we could position ourselves not just as a follower, because we are in a position as a continent to lead some of the developments. We have shown it in the mobile technology space. I think my wish for the continent is for us to realize the potential that we have, the advantage that we have in being one of the youngest continents in the world. So we have the resources, we have the energy. We need to maximize and capitalize on that energy that we have, to not always be following. Yes, we want to collaborate and partner with our key stakeholders, but we should be in a position where, as a continent, we are becoming a leader in certain spaces. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tabby. And you mentioned many important points, also the investment in knowledge, for example. That's why I would love to close that round with the last question. We talked about investment on the public and the private sector, but even more important, the topic of today, investing in women and investing in female-led companies. We will deep dive on that in the last panel, no worries. But I would love to hand over that questions to all of you on this panel as well. So the final question is, how can public finance and public policy support female-led businesses and startups in the energy transition? What is already there and what is maybe missing? Aniela, I would like to start with you here.
I'll go back to statistics again. So I think that I work actually with a group in the UK. It's called Powerful Women. They support diversity initiatives and gender advancement in the energy sector in the UK. And they say that they have this agenda, which is 40 by 30. So their target is to achieve 40% women in leadership role, in board roles by 2030. It's a very ambitious target, and actually they say, what gets measured gets done. So every single year they measure exactly the advancement of women in that, in those leadership roles at the table, as somebody has mentioned earlier. And as it stands today, it's only 21% of women that are in that position in the UK. So, there is a lot that needs to be done there for that space to change and for progression to be done. And as we said earlier, diversity helps business. So for sure, in order to achieve all of those ambitious net zero targets and to shift the dial, we really need to do something when it comes to diversity as well. So what can be done? I guess, it's so many things that can be done, but I think that it would be good to have support from government, in that regard. So I think that any technical assistance there, creating the space for those mentoring, role modeling, networking opportunities, and so on and so forth, that should be there. But also, the access to financing. We've heard one of the speakers earlier creating that space herself, in a female-led entrepreneurial role. But it would be good to have that space actually regulated and, seeing encouragement from government, but actually schemes which would facilitate and encourage that investment. What else? Tax incentives. So I guess that would be, that will encourage a lot of those kind of very ambitious and amazing women, which take, open the door into entrepreneurial routes, just to take that, that brave space and be encouraged to do so, and so on and so forth. Also, public and private partnership. We need to see more women in those powerful roles and on TVs and so on, just to encourage and inspire those generations behind us, and to do the same, and have those ambitious future ahead of them. But yeah, those are, I guess, some ideas.
That are already some ideas. Eman, something you want to add here? What can be done by public finance and policies to support women?
Well, so thank you so much for what you say, because it's really covered most of the aspects. I would just would love to add having a quota of women. And in this regards, I would love to share with you a black comedy status that I have been 4 years ago. So we have this program to empower more women in the energy sector, and we have sent to the official government of one of the countries to nominate 15 women, and because of the culture differences, I didn't realize the names. Then after that, when we have the first welcome speech, I found 15 men in front of me in a program to empower women. So for me, it's a very black comedy story to tell. And since then, I have quota in everything for women. And I believe since we are still facing this huge deviation toward men, we still need to consider having quota for women, and of course to go further in the capacity building and training programs, and even creating role models for women in the sector, because as most of the STEAM jobs, we are still having the same barriers, including social and gender norms. I mean, people are still talking about the physical capabilities of women till now, which is, come on, yeah. It's very weird. And even the mental capabilities, by the way. And the prevailing hiring practices also needs to be considered, because it's quite obvious, especially in the private sector, as the wages gap between men and women. So considering a quota from females is the first thing that I would recommend to have it, and trying to avoid having this social and culture norms. And what I believe the most is that we don't need one seat on the table, we need half the seats on the table. This will be fair enough. That's it.
Tabby, I know it's getting harder and harder to find something that has not been
all the points
before. But maybe you have a story as well for us.
I don't actually have a story. 2 points, but everything, thank you to my colleagues. They've already mentioned all my points. But one thing I want to maybe emphasize on, being practical about supporting women, whether they are supported by men or by other female. Let's be practical. Let's make sure that our policies, procurement policies in the various companies that we work in, support women, right? So put aside 30-40% of your resources and procure from women-led companies. And they should really be women-led and not be a facade. So let's stop talking. South Africa has a Women's Month in August. And for my sins, I've been part of those women initiatives and women talks for almost 2 decades. And for 2 decades, we're talking about the same things. Women need to get a seat on the table. Women need to be empowered. But we hardly ever talk about how exactly are we going to empower these women. Yes, there is a part that government needs to play. There's a part that other women need to play. But how do we make sure that there are policies that actually advance that agenda, right? So that's the procurement. Let's procure from women-led companies. Let's make women rich, because when they are well-resourced, they will find their voice. They will get into spaces and be able to express themselves. So let's just talk less and do more. The last point is, and I'm very biased because I've also been one of those people that have been mentored by men. And it started at home, where my father, I don't think he had a choice because he had 3 girls. And then eventually he got a boy. But he wanted the best for his girls. And he's always been very supportive. And there were no limits to what a girl child or a male child would do in my family. So I came from that background thinking that I actually can do anything that I put my mind to it. And for some reason, we tend to listen to a father's voice. No, not to listen. A father gets into a girl child differently from a mother. Mother serves a certain aspect of your makeup, and a man serves a slightly different one. And when mom says you can do it, I actually believe it. But if my dad said, you are geared for this, somehow it works. And I'm saying I'm encouraging the few male in the room to encourage their girl children. And also for us as women, not to look to each other only. Look at men. I've had 6 or 7 bosses in my life, all male, except but one. And all the males have been nothing but supportive. They are not easy. They're not easy beings, but they want what's best for you. And I have a very supportive partner who is taking pictures and videos right now. But that's the message that I want to make. Let's be practical about how we support women. And secondly, let's not just look to women as allies. There are men that are allies. And to men, I know you are not fixated on trying to pull women down, but be intentional about supporting women. Be intentional about having those conversations. The same way you would speak to your guy friend about an opportunity there and the other. Extend it to your female colleagues. Why are you keeping it in the guys? Why? So I would really encourage male in the room to support women empowerment, because women empowering each other, we're not going to really make the impact that we want if we don't include men in that equation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Tabby, just one last word. You mentioned you're doing this conversation and talks for 20 years now. You don't have the feeling that something has changed. I do have the feeling a lot has changed, and all the work that you have done and all the other women is paying off now, finally. Because when I was young, I'm 40 now, and when I was younger, and there was like, okay, I want to do something in IT, I want to do something in physics, it was just like, really? And now it's getting totally normal that little children, little girls want to study something on IT, want to learn something, want to learn how to code. It's becoming so much normal. So the work you've done pays off now.
Thank you. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh, and I want us to get even to higher places, but we have made progress. But if we can also, as I said, speak less and just keep doing, I think we'll make even better progress in 10 years.
We still have a lot to do. I absolutely agree on you, but we've reached already a lot as well. Katharina, now it's getting even more complicated to add something here. We're going to ask you anyways.
Yeah, so I underline everything what you are saying. Thank you so much. And I would also totally say we are standing on very strong shoulders, you know, and we should never forget what women before us fought for, because if they wouldn't have done that, we would all not sitting here. So we always have to keep that in mind, but work forward. So I have to add something. I would say we need political leaders who are feminists. And political leaders who are not only on the International Women's Day are talking into the video phone and are saying, yeah, women's rights are very, very important. And then 364 days in the rest of the year they're doing, I don't know, not feminist politics. So I think it's really important that the head of the states doing politics who are for all genders, and that starts with quotas everywhere where you can put it. So for example, we as a Green Party, we want the half of the power law, we always saying like this, in the Bavarian State Parliament, so that there is as many women as men in the Bavarian State Parliament, because we think it should be normal that half of the population is also represented in this parliament. And yes, that's the spirit. And it goes on and on, talking about education, how we educate girls and boys, because that's my key point. Feminism is good for everyone. Feminism is also good for men, because it breaks up these silly stereotypes, how a woman has to be, how a man has to be, what a typical girl job is and a boy job is. Feminism frees us all, let us say it like this, and it makes a better world for everyone. So it's very important that everyone who has a saying, let it be in business, let it be in the civil society or in politics, is a feminist and puts their work to this gender equality. I think that's the point I wanted to add.
Katharina, thank you very much. And to all of our panelists, we do now have the incredible amount of 4 minutes for your questions. So I just turn to you. Do you have any questions? Perfect. Go for it. Sprint to the microphone. Whoever is first gets the first opportunity to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Jenny Knumbi. I just have a question. We have been talking about empowering women. What advice can you give to a young graduated engineer who had ambition, currently trying to search for a job, and who want to, what I mean is, you are trying to apply and you always get rejection, and sometimes you ask yourself, where are the support and where can I get the support to be in the field? Because sometimes you get rejection because you don't have experience, and it's very difficult. Yeah, we just heard about empowering women, but where can you find this support?
Any advice from you, where to go to if you're young professional
I can start with that,
starting
perhaps.
the professional life?
I would say just take every single no you have as, you know, an opportunity for you to just strengthen your ability, you know, to deal with that situation. But as an advice, I would say, you know, just don't give up. I think that there are for sure, I know that, you know, so many of us are looking for women engineers. So apply for all of those big engineering companies, go for graduate schemes, go for apprenticeship schemes. There is a lot of demand out there, and I can honestly say that we are struggling to find women engineers, and we are looking just for that. So don't give up, you know, just use all of the channels there for you to be able to locate jobs and apply for them, and just, yeah, knock at those big corporations, especially engineering focus, because there will be opportunities there waiting for you.
I think there are lots of companies looking for talents. The so-called war for talent is going on. So there should be no problem at all to find a way into the companies with an internship or something else you would like to recommend. Tabby, maybe.
Yes. I also wanted to say, in addition to keeping on, I'd suggest that they volunteer.
Yeah.
Sometimes it might be tricky, it might require that you spend resources to get to your workplace, but sometimes getting into a job, volunteering will equip you, will give you the experience that perhaps an employer would be looking for, especially if you can't get into an internship. The second part, being an engineer myself, I know that you're typically not taught soft skills as such, and soft skills are not soft. They're actually very hard, and they tend to be undermined, underplayed, or not emphasized on. So equip yourself with whatever soft skill communication skills. Today's generation is lucky that there are tools and resources online. LinkedIn has resources. You can follow certain people just to empower yourself. But other than that, also identify or find bodies that support women, reach out to them. And do reach out to random people on these social platforms. You'll find the most unlikely of people. Not everybody will say yes. Some people are busy. And when you do approach a mentor, be very specific. Don't go there and say, I don't know, I just want to grow. Be very specific about what you want to achieve, because most of the people have limited time and you want to make the most of the very limited time that you get from somebody who can provide advice. Yeah.
Very good advice. There was a second question in the room. Okay. Somebody sitting, I think it was over there, but... Oh, you just moved over here, I'm sorry.
It's me. Same person. So, first of all, thank you all for your amazing words. My name is Roni. I used to work in the Israeli Ministry of Energy until 5 months ago, and now I live in Munich. My question is to Ms. Schulze. Did I pronounce it correctly? Yeah. So I'm sorry, it's less about women and more about policy. So you were talking about obligating solar panels. This is a subject that is really close to my heart because we're trying to also promote it in Israel. Is there any plan to do it on public buildings? And second question, which connects, is, so Bavaria is the capital of solar energy in Germany. I mean, you cannot argue with this fact. My question is, I mean, it has the highest capacity, I think like 18 gigawatts. So my question is it due to good policy or despite the policy?
I would say it's despite the policy, because a lot of brave people and companies saw the opportunity and did it anyway. Even if the government in Bavaria a couple of years or months ago were still very much into oil and gas, and I always was saying it was happily traveling to Moscow, and now because Walburga was saying it in the beginning, because of the horrible war from Russia against the Ukraine, slowly a shift is coming. So what your first question was, is there a chance that it's going to be a law? And I can just say in Bavaria we have election in autumn. So if we have another government who takes that serious, it will become law. At the moment, all our ideas which we were putting in the parliament were neglected. So you can be sure, as a Green Party, we are fighting for a very good result, and we hope to be part of the government in autumn so that we can come closer to our goal, a climate neutral future and 100% renewables also in Bavaria.
Thank you, Katharina. Maybe one last question we could take, a very quick one. I'm so sorry. Who's the first one at the microphone gets the possibility?
Hi, I'm Sabrina. Thank you so much for being so encouraging. Comment/question. What advice would you give to a seasoned climate and policy expert analyst who is close to despair almost on a daily basis? This week we had this huge failure in our government when it comes to the heating law. So our heating sector eats up 40% of our emissions every year, and we're not going to see a defossilized energy sector and defossilized building sector anytime soon. And also there's this huge risk of rollback when it comes to international climate policy. You know, we might have a true fossil COP in Dubai this year with this whole idea of prolonging the life of oil and gas with the help of CCS. So sometimes I just don't know what to believe anymore. You know, we have all these opportunities, and this room is just full of people who want to make a difference. And then we are just running against walls on a daily basis, not just as women, but as a whole community. So do you have any encouragement to share with this amazing group of women in the room?
Who wants to go first?
Okay, I can say it really quick.
Tabby, you have to leave.
Okay, then you can
Leave to another presentation.
Yeah, so just take 30 seconds and then we go to Katharina and then we close the panel as well.
I don't have any wisdom, Tom. Really, except that we do not have an option but to keep pursuing lobbying, because that's the only way we're going to win the battle. It's not going to happen overnight. We are dealing with vested interests of centuries, at least a century, and we have to go at it for another couple of decades. So don't despair. You are not alone. There are a huge army that is fighting with you. You might not see them on a daily basis, but we are here fighting the battle with you. And one day we will win the battle. Thank you.
Tabby, thank you very much. A huge round of applause. Thanks for being with us. I know, I absolutely appreciate that you've been with us. Just additional 30 seconds for Katharina, and then we close the panel anyways.
No, she said it perfectly. Okay. I just want to add one thing. I totally feel you, and I think it's also very important to do sometimes a little bit of self-care, because rescuing the world is sometimes very exhausting. So my tip is eating a lot of ice cream, and on the next day, the world looks a little bit better, and get some sleep that you sometimes need. And then the rest is, she's put it perfectly. Work together and keep on fighting.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much to the whole panel, to Walburga and Tabby, who had to leave us. Katharina, to you, Eman, Aniela, it was a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much. This is your round of applause.